This is baby formula. Costs over $70 for this baby formula. A sack of potatoes, one bag of potatoes. Apples. In French, it's pomme de terre, so it kind of gets confusing.
Yes, Jagmeet, it gets very, very confusing. When we come back, we're going to be discussing the communist policy of Jagmeet Singh that's supposedly aimed at price gouging. But what it really means is empty store shelves. When we come back, we'll be examining this.
So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need the resolve to resist.
Yes, as Sasha always said, please like the station, smash that like button. Support us if you can. We really appreciate it. We're a small station trying to be a little larger, getting there incrementally. It's been a great journey. Thank you so much. It's September 3rd. Do you believe it? Here we are in the middle of September 2024. What's on the horizon? Well, Parliament's coming back this month, and we are expecting a wild session. Hopefully, a lot of that will be directed against the online harms bill, which Trudeau will reintroduce as for the second reading of this bill. Don't think for a minute he's forgotten about this. This is more important to him than anything else. He might not tell you that. He might pretend it's not really on his radar, that he's focused on housing, things like this, or he's focused on now it's tariffs, which is the policies, of course, he stole from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. He's really concerned about censorship. And he's watching what's happening in the UK. It's just incredible. A guy yesterday was arrested for posting the Union Jack on his Facebook page. It is insanity over there. We're going to go on about more of that this week. In fact, I hope to get Neil Oliver on to discuss that at some point, because this is absolute insanity. And you know it's coming to Canada. But what we're going to be discussing today is Jagmeet Singh's insanity and how he thinks a policy about price gouging is going to somehow make a difference. Except it will make a difference to prices, but it's going to mean you won't have anything in the grocery store to buy. This is called communism. When you dictate the price of goods and you tell people how much they can receive, eventually they're not going to be able to produce any more of those goods because they're not getting the financial return they need to do so. This basic economics. Jagmeet Singh doesn't understand basic economics. He is completely barren of good fiscal management. And this is all about he's a one-trick pony right now. It's all about price gouging. And where do you hear that all the time? Kamala Harris, Democratic presidential nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris. She's also got a price gouging scheme. Read price controls, where the grocery shelves will be as empty as they are in Venezuela or Cuba when you have the government in control of the economy. Producers stop producing. People end up not being able to buy anything and they starve. Let's listen to this great interview here with Tommy Mulcair, former NDP leader. I always said Tom Mulcair was the most conservative leader the NDP party ever had. And you recall the 2015 election that Justin Trudeau unfortunately won. Mulcair was actually to the right of Stephen Harper in some issues. And I find him refreshingly honest because he really does call a spade a spade. And here he is talking about Jagmeet Singh and Singh's future. And he doesn't for a minute believe that Singh is just somehow going to call it quits with this coalition with Justin Trudeau. He wants to stay in. He doesn't want an election this fall or next spring. He wants his pension, and that's all it comes down to. Let's have a look at this.
For being here as always.
Good to be with you, Renee.
So let's start with a press conference held last week by Pierre Poilievre. First off, let's take a listen.
He will not quit. He must be fired. And the person to do it is Jagmeet Singh. Break the costly coalition with Trudeau to trigger a carbon tax election where Canadians can choose.
All right. So, Tom, what do you make of what Poilievre is saying there? And is there any chance that Singh pulls out of this deal and forces an election?
Not the slightest. Singh's numbers, I mean, the NDP's numbers have been really plummeting since the beginning of the summer. It's very tough for them. They're being pulled apart on both ends. On the one hand, a lot of progressives are afraid of Poilievre and they're going over to the Liberals, people who would have normally voted NDP because of their policies. But Trudeau has adopted many of those policies, so it's going to cost the NDP on that side. And on the other side, a lot of working Canadians, a lot of people who have been in the union movement, themselves, so they have always been tilting towards the NDP, but a lot of them are going over to Poilievre's Conservatives. It was interesting, Renee, not that long ago, Poilievre imposed on his caucus the idea of voting in favor of anti-scab legislation. That didn't sit well with a lot of them, but you could see that there was a game plan there. Poilievre is thinking about this. He knows that there are a lot of votes for him to get there, and working people are being hit hard by inflation. They're paying very high taxes. Trudeau will always plead that he's giving them a break and he's bringing in dental care and things like that. But those workers are saying, no, we're less well off now than we were when you came to power, and we want to get rid of you. So it's a very tough road to hoe right now for Trudeau and his team. And I think that Singh, of course, is just going to hold on as long as he can. He has no interest whatsoever in going to an election anytime soon.
Because he wants that pension and because he hasn't got a hope in hell of winning the election. And he's probably going to be completely obliterated in the next election. He has been probably the most worthless leader the NDP have ever had. This is a guy who's simply marking time. He is standing there marking time, coming up with abysmal policies that make absolutely no sense, not really fighting for anybody. And once again, this is a corporate lawyer from Toronto who goes around with Versace accoutrement and with accessories from driving high-priced cars. He has no affinity, absolutely no relationship with working-class Canadians. He never really met one until he was forced to go to events as the NDP leader with people who actually work for a living. So this guy has no understanding, but he pretends to be one of these elitists who understands. I know your pain, even though he's never really experienced anything comparable to what working class Canadians are experiencing right now. For whatever you want to call ordinary Canadians, whether they're middle class or working class, we're all in the same boat right now together, which is high taxes, high prices, and low return on everything. We know damn well at the end of the month, we have less and less money in the bank. So many people are living from paycheck to paycheck. Housing is abominable. And once again, we are suffering the consequences of Trudeau's mass immigration program, which I damn well hope Pierre Poilievre is serious about reversing. Because if he's not, we are headed for more of the same. We have to make a hard decision on this because you cannot bring more people into the country when we don't have adequate jobs or housing for them. And we cannot bring too many people into the country at the same time to irreparably change the character of the country because it leads to ghettoization. We put these people in special little enclaves, and often radicalization and alienation is the result. And we don't want that. But of course, let's hear a little more from Tom Mulcair about Jagmeet.
And he does get to point to those very social programs and say, our promise had been to get more stuff for Canadians, and we've delivered on that.
Now, let's talk about Trudeau. He is still hanging on. I want to show you another clip from this past week. The PM meeting a steel worker in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Let's take a listen to this.
The 25% tariffs we just brought in on Chinese steel
Yeah,
to help you out.
that's going to keep my job. Yeah. What about the
$400 million
40% taxes I'm paying, and I don't have a doctor?
The $400 million that we invested in the electric car means you're going to have a job.
Well, I think you're only here for another year. We won't see you around probably another year.
Well, that's what elections are for.
That's right. That's right.
Now, Tom, that steel worker seems.
I'll just add here. I know this is probably the third time I've shown that clip. That wasn't the entire clip, but it is hilarious and sad at the same time. And did you know that clip has gone around the world? It's been seen on Indian television. Of course, Trudeau is not popular in India. They just despise Trudeau because of his antics every time he goes to India. It's been on Fox News, it's been on CNN, it's been all around the world. People have seen this. And what do you think Justin Trudeau is thinking when he sees this? Boy, don't I look stupid. And here it is. I can't even communicate with one of these working class, ordinary Canadians that I pretend to understand, that I pretend to be on the side of. So he's been in hiding actually since that interview, if you will, since that exchange. Haven't seen much of Trudeau, and you won't see much of Trudeau until Parliament resumes this month. He's going to take this opportunity to once again huddle with his advisors and say, what am I doing wrong? He already got advice from the Liberal cabinet retreat last week, which he apparently has dispensed with and said, no, we're not going to do a cabinet shuffle. We're not going to make any great changes. And that has been the result of that retreat. Once again, he did not take advice. And I think that is indicative of the way Justin Trudeau behaves. So let's go back to this Tom Mulcair interview, which I find quite interesting, because there's a refreshing honesty about Mulcair as a former leader of the New Democratic Party that you certainly will never find with Jagmeet Singh.
Pretty sure that Trudeau's a lost cause. Do you see a scenario where he either quits or is replaced, or do you think he's going to be there right until the next election?
Well, that dovetails nicely with what we were just saying, isn't it? I mean, that's a steel worker. He's unionized. He's the type of person who might have been in Singh's NDP camp at one point, might have looked at the Liberals, but now he's saying, I want you gone. And he points to the fact that he is paying 40% taxes and he doesn't have access to a family doctor. Is there a scenario where Trudeau will leave? Of course, because Trudeau is a proud person. He believes he's the only person who can take on Poilievre successfully, the same way Stephen Harper believed he was the only person who could defeat Justin Trudeau back in 2015. And what happened was, of course, Harper was defeated, as was I, because I was leading the NDP at the time. And Trudeau won 3 elections in a row. And Harper, despite having won 3 elections, he had that dark cloud over the end of his career. Trudeau's going to be measuring that. He's going to be thinking about that. He's relatively young. He's got many years of work ahead of him. He'd be quite a commodity in the job market. I mean, you can just imagine any number of large corporations that would love to have him around their table. So he's going to be measuring that. Does he want to go out having won 3 elections in a row and trying to pass the torch to someone else? Or does he want to have one last battle because he believes that Poilievre represents everything that he's against and he has a chance of defeating him? The numbers just show the opposite, that he has very little chance of defeating Poilievre. Indeed, he is probably, one of the only people who can see Poilievre get elected. If the Liberals had a new leader, they might be like the Democrats in the States, have a breath of fresh air, but none of that seems to be happening right now.
None of that seems to be happening right now because you have a personage in Justin Trudeau who refuses to admit he's doing anything wrong. And I don't believe he'll step aside. I think he is so consumed with egomania, with his own narcissism, that he believes he can win an election against anybody at any time. That gap of 20 points that currently separates him.
Cross-country touring.
That currently separates him from the Conservatives. Sorry for that little glitch there. My producer's working behind the scenes. I've got another great clip of Jagmeet Singh coming up here, and this is just fascinating. But speaking of Jagmeet Singh, remember when he declared boycott against Loblaws, even though he's got a relative, right, who's knee deep in Metro, another grocery store. The hypocrisy of this man. He's got family working for Metro, but no, we've got to boycott Loblaws because they're apparently making money hand over fist, price gouging people. Actually, the profit margin for grocery stores is about 1 to 2%. At the tops, maybe 5. It's not like selling furniture where or cars where there's a huge markup. So Singh is ignorant about what he's talking about, completely ignorant. And yet he goes on, and yet he has a boycott of Loblaws. Let me submit to you that had Jagmeet Singh been leading the bus boycott in Alabama in 1956, I believe it was, that Rosa Parks initiated to stop segregation on buses in the South. If Jagmeet Singh had led that boycott, I would submit that Black people might still be suffering the injustice of having to sit at the back of the bus because Jagmeet Singh is so ineffective as a leader, so ineffective. His boycotts are a joke. He doesn't seem to understand that there's really a principle here, and he doesn't even get the economics of the situation. So let's listen to this really interesting interview with Jagmeet on this Toronto station, which is really woke. It's really liberal. And this is why Jagmeet's on there all the time. It's called Breakfast Time, and it's a Toronto independent. It's absolutely fascinating because they usually love this guy, but he gets this interview here. The interviewer completely sees through the fallacies in Jagmeet's arguments. And before we get to that, here, I showed this at the very beginning.
Baby formula costs over $70 for this baby formula. A sack of potatoes, 1 bag of potatoes, or apples.
Yeah, they're not potatoes, Jagmeet. Those are called apples, and he's got them right literally in front of his face, and he can't seem to recognize the difference. Why is that? Because he reads a script. He's not even thinking about what he's saying. He's got his talking points memorized, or at least sort of there, and he can't even discern, ascertain the difference between apples and potatoes. But here he is, doing his best, doing his BSing best.
Toronto today to push for a price cap on grocery store staples if grocers can't be convinced by the Liberal government to bring down the prices themselves. He
I'm having some problems with this one.
joins us live now in studio to explain. Jagmeet, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
My question to you is, how do you force corporate grocers to bring down the prices or comply with a price cap? The argument the governing Liberals have made in saying that they don't agree with this idea is that, say, the price of sugar rises globally. How can you set a price in one region?
Well, we've seen another country do it. France has already done something really similar. And our main argument is this. When you go into the grocery store and you're buying your groceries, you're spending more than ever before, and you're leaving with less than ever before. So people feel intuitively, I'm getting ripped off.
So Jagmeet is saying here, excellent analysis of what inflation is. I go to the grocery store and I spend more and get less. Yes, that's a definition of inflation. But anyway, technically this is not working. I'm very sorry for that glitch there. And I can see people are leaving en masse because want to get on to Ukraine now, which is quite fascinating. I discovered an article yesterday, and let's have a look at this. Canada took 4 months to send money after deciding to buy air defense systems for Ukraine. What does this mean? Do you think perhaps Canada is secretly admitting that the war in Ukraine is lost? I think so. I think that's the gist of this. And it really is incredible that they're not being honest with us at all about this. If you watch anything except the mainstream media, you realize the war in Ukraine has been lost now for months. And we're sending billions of dollars in what I call the black hole of Kiev. And we continue to do that. And there's Trudeau with his buddy, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. They just love each other so much. Isn't that wonderful? And he keeps, but I wonder if Trudeau is secretly saying, this war is lost. We can't win. And why do we continue to send billions of dollars when it's all going to be lost? And I'm going to get blamed for this. But he has to keep up the front at the same time. And that's exactly what he's doing here. But I discovered this article yesterday. I really want to share it with you. Believe it or not. Believe it or not. And I want to read a couple of paragraphs from this. Now, get this. This has not been widely reported at all. You will not see this on the mainstream media. Fox News, CNN is not covering this. This was based on a report from a very obscure military publication saying that Ukraine is actually wants to sell its weapons to other countries. Okay, so think about this for a second. This is a country on the ropes. It cannot find enough weapons to fight this war. It's losing in terms of men and material every day. It's losing the battle of attrition. In fact, it's lost the battle of attrition. But it wants to produce armaments and sell them. Is it also selling the armaments that Canada is giving them and the United States is giving them? Are they selling those armaments as well? But even if we agree that that's not on the table, why would a country that's that close to ultimate defeat want to sell its own weapons when it has a dearth of those weapons? It can't even supply its own troops, but it wants to sell them. Do you see corruption here? Massive corruption. I mean, listen to this. It's called the National Association of Defense Industry Enterprises of Ukraine. Stated that it believes selling military arms to other countries could be crucial in building Ukraine's staggering economy. It won't have an economy in 6 months. It won't have a country in 6 months. But it's still talking like there's money to be made here. At present, the issue of scaling up production can only compete with the issue of financing it, said the chairman of the Verkhovna Rada Committee on Economic Development. He predicted that defense product sales could bring in another $2 billion in tax revenue over the next 1.5 years, provided Ukraine remains undefeated in the war with Russia. Big if. And it will not happen. While the Ukrainian defense industry can produce up to $20 billion in armaments a year, the government has only budgeted $6 billion per annum for the purchase of weapons. So they want to sell $14 billion of Ukrainian weapons to other countries. Currently, due to the lack of funding, defense companies may go bankrupt as all working capital is invested in the development of new technologies and expansion of production. Today, Ukrainian manufacturers have no direct legal ban on exporting their products and goods, but in the context of the active war, the issue of allowing arms exports becomes particularly complicated and important. So that was my little piece I wrote yesterday for the Human Events. And I said, who else even knows about this? That Ukraine wants to export weapons when it's literally weeks, months away from complete defeat. This is the most corrupt country in Eastern Europe. And you know, when they do stuff like this, when they talk about selling all the weapons instead of giving them to those troops they're supposedly supporting, that there's vast and massive corruption in this country. And I tell you, The sooner Canada extricates itself from this war, demands a ceasefire, a peace settlement, stop sending billions into this black hole of Kiev, the better. And Pierre Poilievre had better wake up to that too, because most grassroots conservatives are sick and tired of financing and subsidizing this war, which is lost. But you won't hear that in the mainstream media. No. They continue to pretend that this war is somehow winnable. It's only so-called winnable if NATO ups the ante and goes one step further. And that, of course, will be the unwinnable scenario for the world, meaning nuclear war. And that's where this war is headed. I've been saying that for the last year and a half. It is headed directly and inevitably towards a nuclear confrontation with Russia if NATO doesn't get its fingers off this, if NATO doesn't get out of this and just allows this war to end. Stop feeding it, because hundreds of thousands, millions of Ukrainians have been affected, dead, casualties of the war, leaving the country. Ukraine is a ghost town outside of the capital, where people still go to the discos and are living it up. Outside of Zelensky's little circle, it is chaos. It is there is increasing famine, there is increasing desolation, and this war has to end. And Canada is doing everything it can to keep it going, along with the Biden-Harris administration in the States. And this has got to stop. I harp on this because, believe me, it is a human tragedy. It's a humanitarian catastrophe. And stop pretending we're there for freedom, because Ukraine is not about freedom. It's an authoritarian regime that clamps down on free speech, free assembly, and is literally forcing people into uniform and into this war, killing them one day at a time. Thanks for watching today. We'll be back again tomorrow. Really appreciate your support. And once again, sorry for that technical difficulty with Jagmeet's interview. Basically, this is a man who wants to shut down grocery stores because he believes the price gouging is completely manufactured. He believes that the grocery stores are making incredible money off of this, and I think he'd rather see empty shelves with low prices than he would full shelves. Communism is not the answer to high prices. Maybe he should start looking at the carbon tax as one solution and get rid of that and stop forcing Canadians to pay taxes they can't afford to. And the carbon tax is one of the reasons the price of groceries continues to escalate. Thanks for watching. We'll be back again tomorrow with all the news you need to